From Synozur, this is Polaris. I'm Chris McNulty. Growing businesses benefit from authentic leaders who connect with their audience. But without establishing your authority, it's hard to get much traction. How can you get started establishing yourself as a recognized expert? How do you become an industry-leading author and content creator? And what does success look like? We'll look at all of this and more with today's guest, Kelly Schuknecht. This is Polaris. Welcome to Polaris Pathways. I'm your host, Chris McNulty, Chief Technology Officer at Synozur. Synozur, the transformation company, reimagines business for our clients, navigating strategies and leadership culture with ease. Today, I'm happy to introduce Kelly Schuknecht, CEO and founder of 2 Mile High Marketing. Kelly has a rich background in publishing and marketing, having worked in the industry for over a decade. She successfully transitioned from running a family-owned business to establishing her own marketing firm focused on thought leadership. And she'll be along here in just a minute. But first, let's define our terms and our data points. And as always, we'll include links and references in the show notes. Thought leadership has become increasingly important in the marketing world, with businesses recognizing the value of establishing themselves as industry experts. According to a recent study by Edelman and LinkedIn, 58% of decision makers say thought leadership directly led them to award business to that organization. These days, it seems everyone's trying to be a content creator, whether it's on LinkedIn or TikTok or whatever flavor of the month social platform you're looking at. There's a lot of quantity and not much quality. And if you think about it, there's a real chicken and egg dilemma. It's hard to connect with an audience until people know who you are. And it's hard for people to know you are unless you've connected with an audience. That's a conundrum that's been looked at by lots of folks. And I think, as you're going to hear, our guest today has a great insight as to how to get started and keep that momentum going. Okay, we have Kelly waiting in our virtual green room. Let's go. So up next on Polaris, we're joined today by Kelly Schuknecht. She's the CEO of 2 Mile High Marketing. Welcome. It's great to have you here, Kelly.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Can you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience, the role you have right now and what took you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my company just last year. I spent 20 years in my career being what I call the person behind the person. And I was laid off in 2024 and decided to, rather than continue being the person behind the person, I decided to start my own company. And, it took me a little while at first to kind of make a decision on how to move forward. But where I decided to really focus my energy is on, I started reflecting on what I had done in my jobs and what I enjoyed, what I did well, my skills and experiences. And I decided to start a thought leadership marketing agency. So now I work with thought leaders, business owners who want to develop their thought leadership platform, helping them get speaking engagements, podcast interviews, LinkedIn management, and also we do a bit of ghostwriting as well for those who want to have a book in hand when they're going out to those speaking events.
And so where are you calling from today, by the way?
So I am in the Leadville, Colorado area. The name of my company, and I think this is maybe why you're asking, is 2 Mile High Marketing. And the reason that I chose that name is that most people know that Denver is the mile high city, right?
Right.
Leadville is 2 miles high. So we are twice as high in altitude. And I liked the kind of symbolism of that also in taking a thought leader and kind of taking them to that peak of the mountain.
You introduced yourself as saying you were the person behind the person. Could you say a little bit more about what you mean by that?
I've been lucky in my career. I would say that I always reported to the CEO of my company, even when I, early on in my career, I got a job in a small startup. I mean, it was a I think $2 million company at the time. and I reported directly to the CEO. And I kind of found in my career that I tended to be the person that, the CEO happened to be the idea person, the visionary, right? They have all of these ideas floating around. And I was that person they could say, hey, do this, make this happen. And which is great. I mean, I was valuable in my career because of that. But I also, because I was like, I like to say the person behind the person, they were the one going out. They were speaking. They were the face of the company, right? And I was hidden. I was behind the person. I was doing a lot. I was very involved in the inner workings of the company and helping establish my bosses as thought leaders, but I was not as visible in that role.
So I imagine going from kind of the predictability of working at one shop for a while to go out on your own, is it scary?
Oh, yep. A little bit. I had been thinking about this company for about 2 years. The company I had worked for was acquired, and I was in marketing, and it was no surprise to anyone that the bigger company that acquired us was going to get rid of people in the marketing department. They had their own in-house marketing team. So I had had a couple of years of thinking about what might be next for me. And I had already come up with my company name. I'd already started my website. I really was thinking ahead, but I could not, I would not have made the decision to go out on my own because it is super scary. And I was thinking about, how do you replace your income? How do you get from the starting point to where you want to be quickly? And it held me back a lot. But the kind of push that I got in, you're on your own now, it just forced that decision to happen quickly, and for me to be able to just decide, like, this is happening now. And if I had just been left to make that decision on my own, I probably never would have, but now I look back and I'm really grateful.
Congratulations on that. That's an impressive move, and I know it can feel a little scary, but it's also bold. And so as you move forward, you're running your own marketing agency. I talk to a lot of folks with different definitions of what marketing is. I'd love to hear what you define as marketing.
Where I really was leaning before I started the company was, I thought I was going to go into fractional CMO services. As we know, there's a lot of fractional service providers out there these days. COVID really changed things in that area. People really, that just started happening a lot. Fractional CMO, fractional CFO, fractional, whatever kind of services you're needing in your company, there's something fractional for that, I'm sure. And so, I was thinking of doing fractional CMO services, but when I really started thinking about it, what I realized I brought to the table was not necessarily that high level strategy and the overall direction of marketing, but the tactical how we're going to get there. That's where I really shine, is in saying, because of my 20 years in being the person behind the person and working for those visionaries, they had the vision and I was helping create the tactical steps we needed in place to get there. So for me, rather than going in that general direction of fractional CMO services, I wanted to get really specific with what we offer. Marketing can be all over the place, right? So when I tell people I'm in marketing, they're like, "Oh, you're a designer, you're creative, you're whatever." Really, for me, I think of marketing as how you're going to get in front of your target audience, right? And so that can look different for different companies, different services, but for us, what I decided to do with my company was to create specific services to help thought leaders get in front of their target audience. So what that looks like for us is, the speaking events, the podcast interviews, the LinkedIn, the content. I've just come from a very content heavy background in marketing. So to me, those are the things that we offer. You can always, different marketing companies offer different types of marketing services, right? Like there's SEO, there's branding, there's these different things, but our specific kind of way that we go to market, our specific niche in the industry is that thought leadership marketing and helping people reach the audience that they want to reach for whatever reason. Most of our clients are trying to get in front of their target audience because they know when they go out and speak, they're going to end up getting clients from that typically.
So when you think about the clients that you're best aligned to serve, are there some common threads across those organizations that you've noticed?
The clients that we serve specifically at Two Mile High?
Right.
Yeah. So usually for us, it's that CEO, that business owner, that person that is usually the most the one that makes the most sense to go out and speak, right? Like they know their client. They started their own company. They know who their target client is. They know what their pain points are. They want to go out and speak to those groups of people. That's usually the people that that are coming to us. We also have a few clients who are professional speakers, so they are not running a company necessarily. They're wanting to build their speaker platform, but in most cases, it's those business owners who really know that the more they get out there, the more awareness they're building for their company, and they're bringing in new clients, new business that way.
So that's great. Do you find that this is more relevant for smaller firms, or do you see a need for this in mid-market and enterprise as well?
I would say most of our clients are in that $2 to $10 million range. So
Okay.
Smaller, right? My background before, when I was an employee in a company, I mentioned that my company had gotten acquired. That was a much larger company, a $65 million company, where we were actually taking not just the CEO of the company, the owner of the company, but we were actually my team that I had created there. We were taking thought leaders within the organization and helping establish them. So at that size, you're gonna I think in most cases, you're going to have more thought leaders within your space, right? That are, maybe you serve different industries, you have different service lines, things like that. And you have different people within the company who want to get out there and speak.
Right.
Then it may look different at that size of a company.
So let me press on that a little bit. Let me challenge that a bit. So if you're a smaller business, many times you have to spend so much investing in brand definition and creating a brand presence. Is it ever superfluous to also bring that focus down to the personal level? Like, how do you see those two sides of marketing interacting?
When you say to the personal level, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, okay. So let's suppose we're looking at a $10 million high-tech manufacturer. We can invest in establishing the brand, the name of the company. We can also invest in having thought leadership and creating sort of a hero presence so that she or he becomes the face of the brand. How do you resolve kind of those two aspects when budgets may be constrained?
I really think it depends on what your goals are. And I think so that size company, $10 million manufacturing company,
Right.
it may be more than the CEO who's going out there. Because at that point, you may have salespeople in place, you may have again, like different service lines or different areas you're trying to reach, right? So you may have team members that you really need to get out there and have them be the ones who are not the face of the company, but you have multiple faces in the company that you want to be known in different ways. Yeah, I think when it comes to budget, it's really about what's most effective for your company and where you want to invest your marketing. So thought leadership marketing isn't for every company, and I wouldn't say it's for every industry necessarily. But the ones where we see the most traction there are professional services, service-based companies. When they are building relationships and their clients are coming from the relationships they're building, that's when they are going to get the most out of their investment in thought leadership type marketing.
Yeah, I find that it transitions well into industries like those. Industries that tend to be more innovation industries where you're trying to stand out. It might be great to put the word Kintoso everywhere at an event, but what makes it memorable is the personal connection. When you think about at 2 Mile High now, what are some of your successes that you're particularly proud of?
We aren't that far along, as I mentioned. We're only under a year into this, but I would say some of the successes we've had. For one, I've been surprised by how many different types of companies have been coming to us. For a lot of our clients are in kind of the marketing space, so marketing agencies. But I mentioned I have a few professional speakers who have come to us. We have a client who is in Asia and won't travel to events, so everything has to be online. It's been really interesting to me, the different needs of the different companies that have come to us and kind of how we're able to personalize the service they're getting, because it's not just a copy and paste. I actually had one sales call recently where the person asked me, like, well, how many of your clients are you pitching to these same events, basically thinking that like there was going to be a lot of competition. Every one of my clients has different needs. I'm not pitching 10 clients to the exact same event. Their message is very specific. Their niche is very specific. Their services are very specific. So we have to find them those events that are the most beneficial to them and what their goals are.
When I survey the landscape for events, there are events that offer to pay speakers. There are events that just have a neutral opportunity where they select speakers, but there's no monetary value there. And there's events where you have to pay to be a speaker.
Yep.
Have you found that to be relevant when you're selecting the right events for the right speakers?
We have that challenge of, when we're going out and pitching clients to events, none of my clients really want to pay to speak at an event, unless it's like just a really, really amazing opportunity. That's not what they want. They want to be able to go and speak. They'd like their expenses covered in most cases. That's usually what they're shooting for. I do also have those clients that are specifically looking for paid events that pay them for the actual speaking. So it's a bit of a juggling act, finding the right events for the right people. We will pitch our clients to events if we don't know if the event pays or what it requires. We'll pitch them. If it comes back with, this is a $25,000 sponsorship required to speak, I'll let the client know. And in most cases, they say, okay, skip it. Yeah. Then we move on to the other opportunities that are a better fit for them. It may make sense to sponsor if you're a $10 million company. It may make sense to sponsor an event for that speaking opportunity. But in most cases, they're really just trying to build that speaking platform. So, they're not quite to that point yet.
Part of that journey isn't just creating those opportunities, but also helping shape what actually gets said. And I know when you and I met before, we talked a little bit about messaging. How do you work with clients at kind of reshaping their messaging?
We have had some of our clients will come to us with, this is my talk. This is the talk I give. I know my stuff, so that's great if they have that. If they don't have it, we help them kind of refine that. I usually try to have, for every client, I try to have 3 kind of go-to presentations that they don't have to have all of the information developed yet, but kind of the title description of 3 talks they could give. And then I kind of play with that depending on the event, because some events may have a certain theme, a certain focus. And so I might want to try to, adjust their talk to make sure it fits within the theme. But so we will help them with refining that messaging, making sure that we have kind of those go-to descriptions that we can pull from. We had one client who was specifically looking for events that were AI related. So we were looking for AI specific events. And in his case, we were not getting traction. It was too general. A lot of the AI conferences are requiring sponsorship to speak at them. Being a newer industry, that's how they're creating these events, is they're having to get people to sponsor to be able to do the event. So in that case, with this particular client, we talked with him about, we've got to maybe refine this, get either more niche specific, industry specific, or even kind of refine our approach. And we have done that for him. So it depends on the client and kind of their own experience with speaking. So some people have a lot more experience and, they don't need us to tell them what to tweak, but in a lot of our clients' cases, they want our feedback. They want our kind of help in refining that pitch to make it more successful.
I have some friends who are facing this themselves, who's delivered a similar talk so many times they're bored of it. Does that mean that you're establishing presence, or should they move on? How do you counsel people who are facing that?
So yes. So not a client I worked with, but a former boss. We had that experience where he gave the same talk over and over and over again. He was bored of it, but the audience wasn't necessarily bored with it because every time he's going out and speaking, in a lot of cases, they'd never heard it before, right? But to him, it was like he'd said it a million times. We would take different spins on it and try to make it feel new and fresh, right? So we actually had one presentation we did every year, but we would adjust it. So it allowed a little more creative freedom for him when he's speaking to be able to kind of change it up and feel like he could add in different stories, things like that. Because it can get monotonous, right? But you have to think of it from your audience's perspective too. Even if you've given the same message a dozen times, if it's a brand new audience, it's the first time they're hearing it. So it's still a powerful message. Don't get bored with it, because otherwise your audience is going to feel that too. If you're feeling like, ugh, I keep saying these same things, that's going to come out to your audience as well.
You like to use podcasting to help refine messaging. What's that like for first-time guests?
Yes. So when I started my company, that was the first thing I did, because it's such an easy, it's an easy way to get yourself out there. You know, it doesn't cost any money, just takes your time basically to do the research, the pitching yourself, scheduling, that kind of thing. But I started doing that where I just was getting myself on any podcast I could get out there. And I was learning from the questions that were coming up, or the things that the host would kind of fixate on. I was learning how to speak around those areas better, what stories to dive into more. And so I tell my clients that, especially if they don't have a lot of experience with speaking, that getting on as many podcasts as you can early on really helps you with refining that messaging and understanding what people are interested in and where you should focus your attention in your talk. So that's what we do with our clients, is we try to get them on podcasts first, especially if they haven't done a lot of speaking. And then we can also give them feedback through those experiences as well.
One of the other techniques that you use is authorship and book publishing, which imagines not where you would start a client, right? If they're a first-time speaker, they may not have enough content to turn to a book. But what does that evolution look like for your clients?
When I started the company, I took all my experiences and packaged them up, right? So my first 10 years in my career, I was actually in a publishing company. I ran a small publishing firm. And so from that, I learned that every time I talked to people about my background, they would ask me, or they would say, you know, I've always wanted to write a book, or they'd ask me how to write a book. So I decided to package that up with the thought leadership marketing, where I've done ghostwriting in the past. I've worked with authors for 20 years now. And so I know that world really well. And when people are going out, they're speaking on stage, it really helps build their credibility when they have a book that is on their topic. I took that and we created a ghostwriting package that we can help those business leaders write their actual book and have that in hand. And you mentioned that they may not have their talk really, they may not know what they want to write a book about yet if they're new to speaking. I found that in most cases, the business owners we work with, or if they're thought leaders within their company, they often know their material. They know those questions that their clients are asking them. We usually start with outlining the book and what those questions are, what those things are that we want to cover. And then when we do the ghostwriting, we're pulling all of that information out of that person. So like you, Chris, if you wanted to write a book, we'd interview you every week and we would pull all of that information out of your head and then turn it into polished writing that, so you might just kind of get to brain dump on us. And then we turn that into the actual book content. In most cases, though, those people who are wanting to go out and speak, they know what they should write about. It's a matter of sitting down and doing it. That's the hard part.
So I will give the audience a tip. One of my I've written 3 books. The first one I wrote, I was a prolific blog author, and I was always writing about what, Microsoft technologies. I was like, how hard would it be to just take all of my blog posts for a year and turn them into a book? And the answer is really a lot harder than you think.
That is a great approach, though, to doing it.
Sure, but it doesn't lead to something that's cohesive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I think having that coherence, when you have a message that is coherent and consistent across the podcast, across speaking, across writing, I think that's where you can really elevate the credibility.
And I would actually flip that around. So you had content that you could pull from, and that's great if you do. But like you said, it was a lot of work to make it work, right? But another approach would be if you are if you like writing, if you enjoy writing, you enjoy blogging, you could outline your book and then start writing the book as blog posts. So doing it in the other order where you're already identifying what you want to talk about from start to finish. You don't have to write it in order, but you can start writing those posts to help basically create the content that will then turn into the book in a more organized way.
So Kelly, you've taken one of your clients on a journey that's taken them through podcasting, through speaking, through writing a book. What happens after the book gets published typically? Is it book tours and celebrity interviews? Obviously not. What happens post-publication typically?
It depends on the book and the audience, right? Just like anything, it's going to be a custom plan. But I'll tell you, so right now I have a course. This I developed last year. I mentioned that people always say to me, like, I've always wanted to write a book, or how do I write a book? I just always had that question come up. So I created a course on how to write a nonfiction book in 12 weeks. And I had a woman who went through my course, and we got to know each other while she was going through the course, because she would email me and we just got to know each other. Well, she just recently published the book this month, actually. And in her case, her book is not promoting a business. She wrote a book on being the caregiver, the emotional side of being a caregiver for a loved one with Alzheimer's or dementia. And so her book was, is different than a lot of my clients' books, but in her case, things have just come together so naturally. She was asked to speak at an Alzheimer's event next week. She was interviewed by her local news because they heard about her book and interviewed her. She signed up for a book signing at a local bookstore that she had mentioned in her book. She also sent a copy of her book to Kelly Clarkson because she talks about Kelly Clarkson in her book. So she was like, I'm going to send a copy and see if I can get anyways, it's been really, really fun these last couple of weeks to watch what has happened. That book came out of her just so naturally and organically. I mean, she took my course to write it, but like it was such a deep meaning for her when she wrote it that all of these things are just coming together because she's authentic and she has this message she wants to share. And that's been really interesting to see. For business owners, it might not quite be that natural that that's happening. But typically, I mean, you can, if you have a big company, you can do like a book launch party. You could do a lot of social media posting around the launch of the book. You add it into, if you're doing podcasts, at the end of your podcast, you want to make sure that you're plugging your book, right? You, if you're going out and speaking, that's going to be something that you're going to share in your talk. You also maybe have a table at speaking events where you have copies of it there. There's a lot of ways that you can use that book as kind of a holistic approach to marketing, not just publish it and assume that you're going to sell 1 million copies and everything's going to just fall into place from there. You want to make sure you're using it strategically in everything you're doing.
That's such a wonderful story. What's the name of the book, by the way?
Yeah, Memories Matter. Dawn Brenneman Wirtz is the author. She took my course, wrote the book, and it's just been really fun to watch all of these things coming together for her. So hopefully the next week or two on my LinkedIn, I'll share more of her story and kind of the follow-up after the event that she gets to speak at.
That's great. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So when you look forward or look above, because you're already 2 miles up, right? What's next for 2 Mile High Marketing?
Great question. So we are just we are in that stage. I mentioned that we started last year. I have been very fortunate that I've been able to grow things pretty quickly. I have 3 employees that work for me. And now we're looking at evolving that structure of our company internally, growing our ghostwriting clients, and offering more. I really want to start offering things like workshops, group coaching for thought leaders, that type of thing. So that's kind of some of the stuff that we're working on now that hopefully we'll roll out in the next few months.
So one thing I always love to have my guests share with the audience is to move afield of the worlds of business and technology and marketing and look into the larger cultural world as a whole. So you've already shared one of them, but I'd love to hear about a movie or a song or a book that's had an impact on you in the last few months.
Okay, so the one that I share often, it's Personality Isn't Permanent by Benjamin Hardy.
Okay.
Have you heard of it, Chris?
I have not heard this one.
Okay. So I highly recommend it. This book I read more than a few months ago, but I read it maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And it was a book that, I've mentioned I was the person behind the person, and I liked being hidden and behind the scenes. I didn't have much of an online platform. But I read that book, and one of the things that really stood out to me was that if I wanted to advance in my career, if I wanted to grow beyond where I was, that I needed to face my fear of public speaking. So it might be ironic that a person who developed a company to help people get speaking engagements is drastically fearful of getting in front of people and speaking.
Sure.
But I read that book. I challenged myself. I started doing videos online. I started speaking publicly, and I faced that fear. And that's honestly, that's what led me to eventually start my company.
Yeah, we had a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago, Chrissy Connor, who had a similar journey, and she forced herself to do 100 live video events in a year to get over her fear of being on camera.
Yep. Awesome. I'm going to go back and listen to that one for sure. Because it's true. We tell ourselves stories. We tell ourselves, I'm not good at that. I'm not the person to do that. If you want to be a CMO someday or a company owner, or, if you want to have a platform online, you have to start doing these things. And it just was like a challenge to myself that I think changed everything for me.
So what's the best way for the audience to stay in touch with you?
Yeah. So 2milehighmarketing.com is my website. And if anyone listening is interested in thought leadership, maybe thinking that they want to develop their thought leadership platform, I do have a thought leadership scorecard, a quiz assessment on my website that you can take, and it will help you learn kind of where you fall on that range of being from starting to an established thought leader, kind of where you fall and maybe some of the areas where you might want to focus and work on in order to grow into more of a thought leader and grow that presence.
That sounds like a great resource. We'll include that in the show notes. So, Kelly Schuknecht is the CEO of 2 Mile High Marketing. Thanks for joining us here on Polaris.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll be right back. Up next on Polaris Events. Halfway through 2025, there seem to be more events than ever coming up. Here's what we're watching. FY26 Forward on July 29th. I'll be sitting down with our CEO, Michelle Caldwell, for a fireside chat about Microsoft's new fiscal year and how Microsoft partners can best align for success. TechCon 365 Atlanta. That's kicking off August 11th at the Georgia World Congress Center. TechCon 365 Dallas will kick off November 3rd at the Irving Convention Center. Closing out the year, we're also looking ahead to Microsoft Ignite this November in San Francisco, as well as ESPC 25 in December, and that's being held in Dublin, Ireland. There'll be more details as we get closer to those events. We'll have links to all of that and more in the show notes. You can learn more at Synozur.com/events, and we'll add more events throughout the year. And if you have an upcoming event you'd like us to promote on Polaris, please get in touch. We'd be happy to. Well, that's a wrap for another episode. I'd like to thank our guest, Kelly Schuknecht, of 2 Mile High, for joining us to explore the leadership for emerging companies. We encourage you to check out our show notes for links to everything we talked about today. I'm Chris McNulty, and this has been Polaris, the show that charts the course of the business and technology transformation from Synozur. Learn more at Synozur.com. See you next time.